I am Josh Human. I'm the Curator of Education and Public Programs at the Power Plant Contemporary Art Gallery at Harbourfront Centre in Toronto. We are so pleased to be online with this conversation between artist Leonardo Drew and curator Amin Alsaden. Before we begin, I hope you will join me in acknowledging the history, culture, and stewardship of the land of this region's Indigenous people, most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit, a Mississauga Ojibwe First Nation. We seek to live in respect, peace, and right relations with them as we live and work upon their traditional territory. The Power Plant, founded in 1987, is Canada's leading public art gallery devoted to the presentation of contemporary art, artists, and ideas through exhibitions, publications, talks, and events. With 3 seasons each year, fall, winter, and summer, under normal circumstances, the staff prepare and present up to 10 exhibitions most years, featuring emerging and established living artists from Canada and around the world. Exhibitions are often first solo exhibitions in Toronto, in Ontario, in Canada, or in the world, and almost always include new work and series, often commissioned specifically for the occasion, are often accompanied by publications that document and contextualize the artist and their work, and are complemented by a wide range of public programs for visitors of all ages, now, because of the pandemic, online. Before I introduce Leonardo and Amin, I am so pleased to introduce Ketchi Wafor Robinson with TD, a cherished supporter of the Power Plant and Kuumba, organized by Harbourfront Centre during Black History Month. Please welcome Ketchi.
Yes, great evening, everybody. So excited to be here. Thank you for the very warm welcome, Josh. I am Ketchi Wafor Robinson, and I'm Associate Vice President of Infrastructure Technology Solutions at TD Bank Group. And on behalf of TD, I am so thrilled to be in attendance at this evening's virtual event. This February is not just another Black History Month. We are gathering at a time when Black communities and allies around the globe demand that we confront the ongoing realities of anti-Black racism in all aspects of society. We must continue to push progress forward. When we launched the TD Ready commitment in 2018, our goal was to support the conditions necessary for a more equitable tomorrow. 3 years later, that commitment has put us on a path to help address inequities across social, economic, and environmental spheres. We continue to seek out better ways to support the Black customers, colleagues, and communities we serve today and into the future. Over the last year, we've invested more time than ever before in dialogue with community and industry leaders from Black-led, Black-owned, and Black-focused organizations while centering the voices of Black TD colleagues. And we are embedding the lessons learned into our institution, driving change and creating a better bank as we move forward. On behalf of TD, I thank you. I thank you for supporting our collective learning journey with your amazing presence this evening. Thank you very much. Have a great one.
Thank you so much, Ketchi. I need an ounce or two of your energy and enthusiasm. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of your colleagues at TD. And so we turn to tonight's program with thanks to Leonardo Drew for agreeing to speak with Amin Alsaden, curator of the exhibition expected to open at the Power Plant in summer of 2021. Though, as we often hear these days, depending on COVID-19. For now, I am pleased to introduce both Leonardo and Amin. Leonardo Drew lives and works in Brooklyn, New York. He attended Parsons School of Design, New York, and received his BFA from the Cooper Union for the Advancement of Science and Art in New York. Solo exhibitions have been held at the North Carolina Museum of Art in Raleigh, the DeYoung Fine Arts Museum of San Francisco, Gallery Napoli Nobilissima, I practiced, I promise. Gallery Napolo, I'm going to get it wrong again. Napoli Nobilissima, Naples, apologies, and the Fine Arts Society, London. Drew has participated in numerous group exhibitions held at various institutions around the world, including at the Phillips Collection in Washington, D.C., the Baltimore Museum of Art in Maryland, Studio Museum in Harlem, New York, the Denver Art Museum in Colorado, and the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago. And his work can be found in the permanent collections of numerous prestigious museums, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, the Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum in New York, the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden of the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., the Institute of Contemporary Art, Boston, Massachusetts, and Tate, London. I'm also pleased to introduce my colleague, Amin Alsaden, who is the Power Plant's Nancy McCain and Bill Morneau Curatorial Fellow. So please welcome both and enjoy this conversation.
Thank you, Josh, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Hope you're all staying safe and healthy during these challenging times. Great to see you, Leonardo. We're delighted to have you with us today, and I'm very much looking forward to our conversation. For everyone's information, we will have a slideshow in the background, and we may refer to images every now and then during our conversation. So, Leonardo, the focus of our discussion will be your upcoming exhibition at the Power Plant entitled Propelled into Otherness, which we will return to in a moment. But first, I would like to go over some milestones from your life and career, which I believe are relevant for what we will be talking about today. So you grew up in Connecticut, near landfills and a soap factory. And I imagine this gave you an early appreciation for materials and the physicality of form. You excelled in drawing, and your talent was recognized when you were a young boy. And if I understand correctly, that was the aha moment, right? When you realized this was or could be your call in life. But in a way, you started making art in a two-dimensional medium, whereas today we know you mostly as a sculptor. Tell us about that.
Well, you know, like understanding like how things are built, how they come together structurally, was set in me instinctively. So I think as an artist, I mean, like it was, I mean, back in the day anyway, I mean, if you could draw, you know, like you were considered an artist. If you drew well, you're like, you know, you're just, you know, like praised by fellow artists. At a very young age, I mean, those artists who were around me were much older, saw what I was doing and realized that, my God, you know, you need to exhibit this guy, you know. And it wasn't like like as a 13-year-old, I was out like sort of like pushing my work. It was really these older artists who took me in and mentored me and sort of pushed me into understanding what it meant to be an artist and to also exhibit, you know, art. And this is, you know, a future for you, you know, a whole other way of life, and absolutely an escape from where I was living in the projects in Bridgeport. So I took that road, no problem. You know? It was a no-brainer, you know.
All right. And then you pursued formal training at the Parsons School of Design and the Cooper Union. And I believe you started your career as an artist in the 1980s, right? Now, I remember hearing you talk about starting.
No, actually, that would have been before. I mean, I you know, once I started exhibiting 13, I mean, I didn't stop. I didn't stop until I realized that I needed to sort of position the work needed to sort of like, you know, realize another, you know, another avenue. Right. So I was always exhibiting until I decided to sort of stop, challenge that, what I was exhibiting, and then say, okay, you need to sort of like not do this anymore, which was all the things that I did well, which is like painting and being able to draw well. Those are the kind of things I was exhibiting in the 70s. Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Come the 80s, it was time to sort of like challenge that. So I just said, we have the prettified surface. How do you sort of get past that? You know,
Right.
after seeing like Jackson Pollock's work, I knew that, you know, the idea of emotionally charged work was possible, but the kind of work that I was doing, which, you know, you saw in the sort of earlier images, it looked nothing like that. But, you know, like I needed to sort of address what was beyond that prettified surface, what I was doing. And I said, the only way to do that was to tie my hands. You know, tie my hands, no longer, you're not going to be able to do this anymore. And you need to find another way to create. And that was the door that I needed to sort of like open. And when I did open it, you know, like it was on, you know.
And you really pursued formal training after your encounter with Jackson Pollock's work, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I was always embedded in the back of my head that, you know, and I had also seen the Picasso exhibition in 1980 at MoMA.
Mm-hmm.
And there was just an explosion, you know. You can only imagine. I mean, that whole museum was nothing but Picasso, and here I was, you know, already introduced to Jackson Pollock and abstractions, and like, and I was doing what exactly, and with my facility, and I need to sort of like say, okay, you know, this is something that you need to sort of like delve further into yourself to find out what that new path can be. And like I said, the only way to do that was sort of not do what I was comfortable doing, you know.
That's incredible. I think this idea of seeing Jackson Pollock and, you know, that being kind of the impetus for transformation in your work is quite interesting. And I want to pose to examine that a little bit. If I remember correctly, Pollock's own work was actually transformed by observing indigenous art making techniques, especially.
That's right.
He was watching the Navajo practice of drawing with sand, right?
Mm-hmm.
For you, seeing Pollock's work changed the way you viewed art. What about Pollock's work that produced that reaction in you, let's say?
Obviously, his base being, you know, spiritually in touch with, you know, like something that was, you know, like embedded in me, you know, and you know, these I guess an innate sense of spirituality also, you know, like that was the draw to both, you know, to both of us. And I think that like when it comes to understanding that the more layers you strip away, the more things are revealed. So like if you're realizing that in Pollock's work, and what I do, you know, I mean, I also would like the idea of holding up in mirror so that you can sort of identify yourself in the work. It's not necessarily about, this is what I think you should see, you know. Mm-hmm. It's more like, you know, like, no, I mean, I'm revealing a mirror. I'm holding it up, and now it's your turn to sort of find yourself here, you know. I think that abstractions have a way of being that mirror almost on an immediate sense, you know, because there's like you have to deal with what you're you know, this emotional charge, you know, this thing, this image, whatever it is that you're standing in front of, you now have to deal with it. So it does become like, you know, your interpretation or that mirror of your inner self, you know.
Right, and I guess also beyond this idea of the encounter with Pollock's work, I personally see certain parallels between your practice and his. On a very basic level, I see formal similarities. Obviously, the idea of abstraction, but also this almost spontaneous building up of a work, right? Through a process of layering and densification. Was that a lesson that you kind of internalized, like right when you spoke?
I think that like the kind of detailing and you know, like trying to sort of like pile on with the idea that the more information, like say like in my earlier work that I could record, the more you would see. But actually, what's the truth of it is the reverse of that is a better solution. Mm-hmm. You know, to revelation, rather than sort of like handing you over continuously sort of like this detailed, you know, like a hit, which is like, you know, this is what I think you should see, and then detailing that. I was absolutely fascinated with like, you know, or mesmerized by the idea of the detail. And I think that never really left. I'm disguising it a lot better now. But if you look at my work, because people always go on about the labor intensive aspect of my works, that is something that is, like I said, it's a thin veil that I'm definitely disguising, like this manic want or urge to detail out, information. And so, like, if you look at this piece that right in front of you, it's a great clue into, like, okay, how to sort of like give you so much at the same time, allow you in at the same time. It's not a wall, actually. It's a mirror. It's
Right.
allowing you to see yourself. Once you have that understanding, like you can balance this idea of oversaturation. Because I would say definitely, if you look at my earlier paintings, these are oversaturated with information. All the things that I thought that you should see. And now it's a matter of like actually taking a step back and saying, here, this is for you. This is a mirror. Find yourself now.
Right. And so I think what you described in terms of the significance of labor, and I would say also the idea of process, right? Like Pollock is known for producing paintings intuitively and kind of directly onto the canvas without sketches and preparations. And in the case of his work, the actual piece that he ends up with, whether it's a painting or another work, is the trace of a process of creation. That's not to mention the involvement of the artist and the artist's hand. I know that you also emphasize the process of making, but I'm always curious, actually, and I don't think I've asked you this before. Do you make sketches, or do you prepare?
No,
No.
The work needs to sort of fully take on itself. That means, through its mistakes, all these like different avenues you sort of like venture into in order to sort of discover what this particular journey is about. So, life is about that kind of meandering and trying to sort of figure things out. And I think artwork and its sort of like coming to become itself absolutely is about those very same kind of meanderings, So you should allow that to happen, on the fly, and not sort of set it up in a diagram or a drawing and then copy that from, I am so well versed in that from my past that when I said you're not going to be doing this anymore, that's exactly what I meant. So that means no studies either.
Right.
No using of your hand to sort of realize, like how, or mapping out how to do this. You're going to have to sort of like take it on. And so it's a life journey. I mean, it's like, but the work actually is something that I also consider a life that's trying to sort of find itself, out of the womb, So you just all you need to do is sort of like get out of the way, You become a tool. You just, you need to sort of put your body in the act, and then it's continue to sort of get out of the way as it reveals itself.
And in a way, you discover the form through the process of making.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's also what people call the cannibalization of my works, because there have been works that I will take apart in order to sort of realize the next iteration of the next piece. So there's never a finished work if it's still in the studio. If it leaves the studio, then I can't put my hands on it anymore. You know what I mean? But if it's in the studio, it's mine.
Right.
And there have been stories of like works that have been either stored with me or returned. You could start saying goodbye. I mean, there have been instances like the piece at the Brooklyn Museum owns. That was literally on a table saw when they called and said, "Do you still have this piece?" And was just talking to my assistant about that today, and he was going on about some of the other works that didn't make it.
That's great.
and listen, I can look back on some of those works and say, yeah, that was a great piece. But what came out of it actually was an experience that you can't really, it's alive, man. It's ongoing. So you have to know that, like, the more layered your life is, the more interesting your life becomes. So the work is following that very same vein. So,
and so really, like, as long as as a work is still with you. It's never finished, right?
That's right. That's correct. Yeah. This piece right here, as a matter of fact, was number 80. This is number 90 now. It's like it transformed from being one thing, which was this floor sort of, it was a piece that I worked on with the fabric workshop. And I was trying to sort of realize the lightness of being of the material, which is cast paper.
Mhm.
And what they did was make something structurally sound from paper, which in effect, it became like plaster, you know? So if you saw it in the museum, you're not allowed to touch it. So you'd have thought these things were plaster. So I said, this is not what I was looking for. So I took 3 years off to sort of realize how to actually realize something that had the lightness of being of that material, that had the essence of paper. And, my way of resolving was to do this, like to crush them and push them into these glass vitrines. And then when it left the studio, it was like, okay, that's it. We need to sort of like figure this out. So I took 3 years off in order to sort of like, find out what it meant to sort of, make this material. So, you just like have to sort of, truly spend time with material in order to know what it has to offer.
Mhm.
So my dexterity with material has everything to do with, I never really ventured too far from me, meaning my core. So materials, once they come in, once I digested them, they will end up inevitably coming out and into the world, and they will find themselves into my language or vocabulary. So I think that someone said that they always could recognize my work no matter what the material was, and that's a revealing statement in itself.
Mhm.
That you never, once you find your voice, that's it. It's like this is like the next iteration of the cast paper works, which is that's paper. All those objects, if you were to compare this to the previous image, this is far more ethereal. It has the lightness of being of like a copy paper, and and it has the emotional charge of my earlier works. So this is just like I said, you need to sort of digest material so that it becomes a part of your trajectory, your language.
Mhm. But you've used all sorts of materials throughout your career.
I continue.
Yeah. But again, this idea of process has been consistent and maybe the common denominator between all of these works. But Leonardo, I think there might be a danger if we, especially when it comes to your work, if we focus too much on the idea of technique alone or process alone, because there are other layers that I believe are equally important. And I think this is why we should also equally acknowledge another important figure in your life, who's the African-American artist, Jack Whitten, your mentor at the Cooper Union, who also used to produce work that in a way embodied this idea of soul or feeling, that would feature in his abstract compositions. So this, for me, is a very different approach from Pollock's. Can you tell us a little bit about Jack Whitten, your encounter with him, what you might have learned, or how you maybe have resisted his influence?
No, I don't think there was any. In our beginnings with Jack's fantastic. Now, Jack's a true heart. He's an abstractionist, and I can only tell you that, when we first met, he was determined to sort of like challenge my facility.
Huh.
He realized that I could do things, and that he needed to sort of like say, okay, okay, so you can do this, but and then he would wait to sort of see how it would take on his challenges. And so in that, it's great to be able to have I've had all throughout my art life. Like I said, when I was 13, there were older artists around me, Ben Johnson, Richard Staymates, Bill Collins. All these guys who came in, older men who sort of like guided me. Jack is also a part of that very same, like a push into, what if, which has always become a, at this point become a sort of like a mantra for me, is what if. They were always at what if, what if you tried this, Or what if you took this direction? That was already sort of embedded in me to sort of like always supercharge and super challenge, like possibilities. So, that just like was just like waving a red flag or a carrot in front of a horse, So it's like, I'm going to move in that direction. And it's like, I'm pretty easy to figure out. And Jack figured that one out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that from there, it was like visiting him in Greece and spending a lot of time with him and his family. He just, he was like a father.
Mm-hmm.
And like, but I will tell you that like the artists, Black artists like Jack, Joe Overstreet, Mel Edwards. I mean, all these guys, were not, they were like invisible. They were real true high school. They were making solid abstract art, but no one could really figure, what does that mean? It's a Black person making abstract art, that doesn't make any sense, So they would never, allow these guys in. That whole generation was kind of like, kept under the couch, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And like, and as I was sort of moving forward, it would seem that like, I would, attempt to sort of, bring Jack in, but no one could wrap their head around the idea that it was, no abstract, artist of color did not make sense to them.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's been a reckoning, and all these things are being corrected as they should.
Right.
And it's a language that's open to all.
Mm-hmm.
Abstractions. I mean, I've embraced it.
Mm-hmm.
One would believe that in looking at looking at my work, that it's it could be this direction or that direction, but I'm an abstractionist.
Mm-hmm.
There's no bones about that. Mm-hmm.
Did you? I'm curious. Did you seek out Jack Whitten,
No,
or
I at Cooper Union. Jack's an instructor, teacher at Cooper Union.
Okay.
I transferred from Parsons because there was no challenges there at Parsons. Mm-hmm. And I remember one of the instructors, Ken Zapkus, he it's interesting. He would ask the other students, which one of these is like Leonardo's work, and everybody would always know which was my work, and he would say, why do you know this is Leonardo's work? And they would say it seems to be more advanced, and he would say seems to be, and I said I get it, it's about time for me to sort of like leave the temple, and move on to another temple, and that was Cooper Union. And it was just that I needed to be challenged. And at Cooper, there was Jack, and he was there to challenge me, along with Julio Mitchell and Ruben Kadish. I mean, there were just like great teachers there. And it was a free institution. That was another thing. Yeah.
Right. And were you aware of his work before you went there?
No, I was not, because like I said, like these artists were not given any kind of props, So when I got there, I was really like, wow, it's like this Black teacher, it's like there were none at Parsons, Right. So when I got there, Jack was like the only one.
That's amazing.
And I had heard about him, and I was sitting in his classes, but I wasn't in his class in the beginning. I was to sit in and try to get in,
Mm-hmm.
And he recognized that right away, and he said, "We got to fix this, because we have to be together."
That's great.
And, and it was really wonderful. I mean, I'm not giving Jack gifts of art, but I don't have anything of his. I wish I had. He didn't give me any gifts of art. He gave of himself, though. So, like I said, my visits with him and his family in Greece from like 1990
mm-hmm.
To almost like 1999. I would stop by to see them, and it was just wonderful. So watching him also do his abstract sculptures there, which he was always afraid to sort of show those works, because he always kind of felt like people would have thought they were like too kitsch or, but like, they were traditional, like almost African-esque sculptures,
Yeah. And this is
he
something
had
that
to make these things,
Yeah, it's something I only discovered recently, because we know him mostly as a painter, but he was talking, I was watching some lecture or interview with him, and he was talking about how he was producing all of these wooden sculptures in Greece, but he's been like sitting on them, never shown them before.
Mhm.
And so I think it must have been also like quite fortuitous, Leonardo, that you ended up with someone like Jack, who also, I would argue, thrived within that really interesting zone between painting and sculpture, because your work is very different, but much of your sculpture emerges out of like two-dimensional bases, right? And I think it
Correct.
still captures and evokes your early beginnings in drawing.
That's correct. That is correct. I mean, really, I'm not sculpting. I'm drawing. I'm drawing.
Right.
And no, really, I tell people this all the time, and it's like, it's not like that this is coming out of nowhere. I mean, like if your understanding of composition and line and delineations, all these things are there, why not? They're going to come out in other ways now, So if the fact that I'm actually wall mounted, these things are, erupting from the wall, says everything and speaks volumes. Yeah.
Right. And I guess now that we spoke about Pollock and Witten, I guess the common denominator between all three of you is abstraction. That's pretty obvious. Now, in your case, your individual abstract works are not necessarily about capturing a specific narrative or message, right? But even though, you kind of resist that idea, I would say that there are underlying themes or concepts in your work. But for some reason, you shy away from telling us about that. You want our encounter with the work to kind of be it. Where does that come
And I do number the works for that reason. The works are numbered and not titled. So I'm not really giving you a clue. This has never really been popular. I'm not saying that I'm actually, guided by the idea that I should make things easy for you to sort of like digest. I mean, it'd be easy for you to sort of like, oh, he's like Black. Of course, it's got to be about the Black sensibility. And of course, there's, that does exist. There's no denying that. There is a sensibility. I mean, there's a French sensibility. There is an African sensibility. There's a German sensibility. All these things are there. I mean, you'll find consistency in my work. So like people Bradford and Piaster. So like but they're obviously more apt to sort of like call things out. Say this is what you should be seeing. This is how even if they're as abstracted as they may be, they will want you to see this, and this, that has never really been the case with me. Like it's the viewers, perspective. It can be just as important and also as informative. It's my job to sort of actually bring this stuff to life. From there, it's like I'm not going to hold your hand anymore. Right. I refuse to.
Right. And again, back to this idea of, yes, you refuse to sort of tell us what the work is about, but again, there are underlying like themes or concepts. And one of the main ideas that I was able to detect is this idea of otherness, which I believe is really important for understanding your work. I just want to share with our audience that the title of the exhibition, Propelled into Otherness, is actually a modified version of something you had said once, something about how artists should constantly be discovering new things and propelling themselves into a state of otherness. And I also found, your work to have this kind of uncanny quality, specifically the sense of alienation that results from encountering otherness. And there are different, I would argue, different manifestations or guises of otherness in your work. One is this formal otherness and this idea that you constantly put yourself in a state that you described as the unknown.
That's right.
What can you tell us about that? Yeah.
Best possible place you can be in. For an artist, I think, if you're a young artist, I think that can be a scary place. But I think for mature adult artists, I mean, the not knowing is the thing that propels you to discover. And that huge question mark or the what if, it's something that you should constantly get up in the morning and want to deal with. It should give you the sort of zest for life. It should give you the sort of the momentum to push forward. Continue to sort of like strip away layers. You should always wake up with the idea that you want to sort of like kick mediocrity to the curb. You want to sort of force the hand of what's on the other end of this. And leverage it and sort of reveal it.
Right. And you achieve that by constantly changing the materials you work with, changing the compositions, and producing really unfamiliar and constantly changing objects, right?
Yeah. Hasn't that brought in, like, I would confess that the art world wants you to sort of make a
consistent
certain signature. And
Yes.
This is what I know of you. And I continue to challenge that. And I know that financially speaking, has not been as rewarding, but like, the fact that I don't really have obligations like family and all that. I mean, all the things that sort of like will force you to sort of compromise your trajectory. I decided, okay, if you're gonna make these kind of things and you're gonna make this kind of commitment, then no one else should be suffering for your decisions or your bad decisions, So like the decisions sort of like push forward with hopefully new discoveries and be constantly motivated to do so. This is something that it's unavoidable for me. But like I said, it's like no one should have to suffer for my decisions to do so.
Right. And I would also imagine there is another sort of guise of otherness, and in terms of what it means for the viewer, right? Because you're confronting us with things that we do not know, and urging us to encounter a sort of otherness ourselves, to step out of our comfort zone when we again confront these objects that you constantly call otherworldly. You actually always call them monsters, which I find quite telling. So do you think of the viewer and the reception of the work?
They're complicit. The viewer is complicit. I mean, they're not excluded from the process. I mean, the very idea that you would believe that like art is created in a vacuum without the idea that it's going to be a part of a world outside of the studio. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, like they're complicit. They are part of the completion of the cycle, the viewer. So I mean, I've had many opportunities to sort of like run into folks who didn't know who I was, and so like get an idea of like what they were seeing in front of them, And I was like, they would say things that I go like, wow, I didn't think of that, Right. It's like, that's I definitely want to take advantage of that. That idea, I remember one time at the Hirshhorn Museum, there was a security guard standing in front of this monster of a piece, and he would wait for folks to sort of pile in, to the room, and then he'd go on his, soliloquy. It's like would let like, oh, this is what this work is about, and he was enjoying himself, man. And I was in there with a friend. And he said, "You have to stop him." I said, "No, this is the time when I get to learn something, And he was going on and on, Right. And I asked him, I said, "Where'd you get all that information?" He said, "The artist told me, So that says that speaks volumes, man. It's like I was speaking to him, or he thought I was, he's standing in front of this mirror, and This is what he felt, and he did tell people, "This is what I feel. This is what." But they complete the viewer absolutely completes the cycle. They are complicit.
And you really enjoy these kind of multiple readings, right? And highly personalized readings. Yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, I mean, the whole ego trip of like, saying, I need you to sort of see, my inner self, and I'm going to tell you exactly what it is, not just through the artwork, but actually through words. And art is cool, and jazz music, man. It's like it continues sort of like bring out other iterations of itself. It shouldn't be stopped by the idea that this is what I'm going to stamp, and this is what you should be seeing, you know. And it's just, I'm like, no, fuck that. I'm like, I have no interest in that. I want it to be wide open, you know, and tonal like music, you know. It should be able to sort of like, you know, you should be able to hit high notes and low notes and emotionally charged, you know, the viewer into believing that they're on a trip, you know, and they should be, you know, and when it come out of there exhilarated, you know, and also informed. But it was their journey. It was not, you know, you just actually held a mirror up, you know, but they need to sort of see that, you know. I think all art is that. It's just a matter of like, you know, who's on the other end narrating it and telling you how you should realize it, you know.
And there's, I think, another rise of otherness, Leonardo, and I don't know if you've spoken about this before, but I think there's a question of scale. For example, I noticed that it's very difficult, at least from photographs alone, and photographs without people, to tell how large or small your constructions might be. Especially, again, like if there is no scale reference in the image. And I think this ambivalence is revealing, and probably stems both from the nature of the compositions themselves, but also the fact that they really somehow evoke almost like an urban construction, right? Like almost like a city block construction.
Yeah, they're like worlds within worlds. I mean, it's so detailed that if a section of something fell off, for instance, I had to learn this one the hard way. Like there were people who would come to the studio and they would see things on the floor. There would be kind of remnants of this or that, or things that fell off of that over there, and they would take them out. I would hand them over as like, you know, yeah, you could take that, you know, and they would take it and they would get it framed. And I would see this thing framed in their home, and it was like, whoa, where'd you get that? When did I get that? When did I sell that to you? I said, there's no way you could have gotten that out of me, you know? But the fact is, within these really small microcosms, there's all this information already embedded. There's so much layering that's still in this very smallest section of these works. That's why when you look at them, the scale problem occurs where you kind of like, you can't know what the scale is if it's in a photograph. Standing in front of it, you know, you're falling into the Grand Canyon, you know? There's all this information, you know? So I think that like that within itself, you know, like kind of reveals a sort of, you know, a constant, I think I would say, narrative that's been with me all throughout. This kind of like, you know, attention to detail. You know, so I figured out, you know, like how to sort of make that happen and not have it get in the way, you know, as a sort of, it's no longer a barrier that you need to sort of like get past, but it actually is now an inviting sort of, you know, situation where you sort of like can find, you know, like all these sort of like, you know, crevices to sort of like do this. I mean, it's like, you know, flying a plane into, you know, like you know, this kind of maze, you know, it's like you're doing this. And I'm aware of that. And I do understand the zen of this, you know. I know that like when I'm making these things that I have to sort of like, you know, find myself, you know, drawn into the whole spell of creating, you know, and not be exhausted by it, but actually be exhilarated by the sheer weight of this, you know. Be able to do that, and then handing that over to the viewer so that they can actually find themselves doing the very same thing without me sort of like, you know, instigating it by words. You know, like I said, you're pulled in now by the actual standing in front of it. I think that the experiences really do happen when you're standing in front of it. It's not, photographs are cool, that these things are three-dimensional, and they definitely are alive. And you know, like they have to sort of like become like a black hole. They will pull you in. It's just up to you to sort of like, you know, just to stand in front.
Right. I want to be mindful of our time, so I want to invite, you know, members of the audience to share with us their questions under the Q&A button. but we're going to carry on with the conversation until we receive questions. Leonardo, I think there's also yet another dimension of this idea of otherness, where you're presenting us with other experiences, whether that's your own experience as an individual, as an artist, and how some of your work, for example, the earlier work, number 8 and pieces of that nature, very much bring back early memories, from the industrial sites that you grew up around. But there's also in your work, which I think is very, very important, how you capture the experiences of the African-American community and African-American history. I remember reading, for example, Toni Morrison, who was talking about how the African-American community is in a way exiled where it actually belongs, which is America. It is a community otherized, if you want, where it lives and where it belongs. And since it's February and we're talking about Black History Month, what can you tell us about your work that addresses the African-American community, African-American history, and specifically maybe if you can speak a little bit about the cotton works, which are incredibly evocative.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you, like in those works came out in 92. Mm-hmm. The cotton works, that is. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing about this is that I discovered that in one of my journeys, I was invited to Senegal, Dakar, to the Dakar Biennial, their very first, which would have been, if I'm not mistaken, it was 92 or 93. And I had the opportunity to go to Gorée Island, which is where, the slave chambers or the catacombs where we're kept. And before we were, launched onto these boats to come here. And the very idea that you can go through this horrific experience of being in these catacombs where there are just these slits in the walls for air. They were only slits because they didn't want you to escape. So all the ones that were closest to the slits in the wall were getting air. And of course, it was, just survive that. And then now to get on a boat, where it was another ordeal. I mean, you have to be like superhuman to sort of to make it through that. And the kind of energies that were intimated by the very people that made it to the shores of America, I'm a byproduct of that, and so of all the other my other folks. And I think that that is what stamped us, gave us our heart. Mm-hmm. I think that comes through in almost all the artwork that you see, and all the magnificence and of what we can bring about in music. I mean, all these things are, they cry out, literally. Mm-hmm. There's a strength. And so there's no way that my work is that's not in the work. It's in there. And that is not in denial here. Mm-hmm. What we're talking about is actually there are different levels of how you say coming together, or the collective. We can talk about race, but we can also talk about the collective as human beings. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We're all related, and right. I think that through all our trials, we have a tendency to sort of believe that we need to come together. Mm-hmm. We need to come together. And why is that? Because we're human beings. We know that instinctively, mm-hmm. That this is something that needs to happen. Break the barrier, the color barrier, break the religion, or all these things that sort of have a tendency to want to separate us from coming together. We need to break past that and sort of get on with actually the very, very human aspect of us, so that we can find the next iteration of us. But we can only find the next iteration of us through a collective. It's not about separation. It's about a collective. Yeah.
That's really beautifully said, because I think even though we must, always remember what these great figures like Toni Morrison, have said about, the struggles and again, the otherizing of the African American community, I think it's also equally important to highlight aspects of your work that capture, our collective experiences, as human beings, because you strike me as someone who is very much invested in dismantling this idea that a particular group, any group should be considered an other, right? Which maybe reminds me also of what another really great contemporary thinker, Achille Mbembe, and the way he talks about the idea of otherness in the world today. And he says, there are no longer others. There is no us versus them. There is no outside versus an inside. We're all in this together. But in a way, I think your work is also significant because precisely because it also reminds us of the history that came before.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
and you're saying that you're capturing this history, which I think is quite powerful. You're saying that you're capturing this history not only in the cotton works, but actually in most of your work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That chain has never been broken. So it's a part of my voice. So it's just not, I'm not going to be specific about any of this stuff. Like I said, you number the things and you're not able to sort of call it out. And I'm not calling it out, but it's there. It's inescapable. It's there.
Right.
Part of my sensibility. It's part of, it's who we are. It's who we are.
Mm-hmm. So, Leonardo, we have a question from John Armstrong. Hi, John, who says, could you speak more about what was about the fabric workshop that made you want to stop and take 3 years to figure out paper? Was it only the new material or something else as well?
Well, it's just that if you're striking out towards, discovery, then you need to sort of complete that journey. I mean, that was only the beginning. Working with it was only the beginning. They introduced or at least collectively we introduced the material, but we weren't successful. At least they felt they were successful. I knew it was not. And I knew that it needed to sort of like be challenged and torn apart. And I even remember Ann Temkin was at Philadelphia Museum then, and she was trying to get that piece to the Philadelphia Museum. I said, it's not done. And she was shaking her head. It's like, oh my God. It's like, what is he going to do? So I crushed them and put them in these vitrines. And I said, okay, it's still not quite it, but we need to sort of take 3 years to sort of like, I didn't know it was going to be 3 years. I just knew I had to take time off to discover, what the answer was to the question.
Right.
And that's just a commitment to a truth that really holistically belongs just to me, because I know that there are people who would say, man, that was a crazy move, man, to take 3 years off, and you're already there. But for me, it was like, no, I was not there. I need to find out what was on the other side of that question, find the answer,
And you're experimenting with new materials these days, Leonardo. Stone?
Color is coming in, and it's like color's never really been a part. I mean, if you were to go all the way back when I was a child, yeah, the color was in my paintings. And I talked to some of my friends from that time, and I told them about my problems that I was having with color, and they couldn't imagine it, because they said, man, you kill color. That's what you do. You're just doing it back in the past, man. It's like, but I need to sort of like, define the new in this, in color. Now, it couldn't be something that I was so familiar with that, I never make things easy. I turn them into these like, problems that you need to solve. So it only now is it starting to reveal itself. I think that in the explosion, color came in into its own, so to speak, and now it's here to stay. But it did take a while. I mean, we talked to any of my friends, Pam Joyner, all of these guys were, they're on that journey with me. And it's like, boy, so he's he gonna get there? You know, that was the question, you know, like, but, you know, I was determined to sort of like, to break the color barrier, so to speak, you know. So I think that like, through this new situation with color, yeah, it's a new world, a brand new world. So to be continued, you know.
This is really great. Thank you so much, Leonardo, for this enjoyable conversation. I'll probably ask Josh to say some final words.
And here I am. I also will extend enormous thanks to Leonardo Drew for joining us tonight for this conversation, to Amin for asking questions that drew out of Leonardo some great insights. So we can all anticipate a wonderful exhibition, Propelled into Otherness, again, expected to open at the power plant for our summer 2021 season. Thank you so much to Ketchi and her colleagues at TD for support of this program and countless others at the power plant, as well as, pardon me, the Kuumba Festival, again, Canada's longest running Black History Month celebration. For those of you who do have a link to an after-hour moment, please know to click that link as soon as this program ends. One more final note, this program has been recorded. It will, as soon as possible, once it's been reviewed by all parties, be put onto the power plant's Vimeo webpage. So once again, thank you so much to Leonardo, to Amin, and to our audience, and have a good evening.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.